And hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us with the Buffalo Startup Week Fireside Chat. We are joined by Dan Magnuszewski and also Mike Canzoneri and then Kanishka Wananaka. They're going to be talking, you'll hear the questions. You guys are going to really enjoy this. Mike is a local technologist and a three-time tech company founder through Argyle Technology Group. His company was involved in many local startups, including Clearview Social, ACV Auctions, Air Expert, among many others. Shortly after Argyle was acquired by IVR Technology Group, Mike joined Torch Leadership Labs, YC company focused on digital learning, leadership, coaching, and mentoring. Kanishka is a young local entrepreneur, community organizer, and philanthropist. He is the founder of Yamu Media. He's also involved as a partner or co-founder at other local startups like MentorDeck, AVA Audio, a recipient of Buffalo's 30 Under 30. He is the co-founder on the board of a few local nonprofits, Grow Buffalo Business, Dinner on the House, and Boot Sector. He has his own nonprofit, Yamu Foundation, that builds schools and provides scholarships to kids in poverty-stricken countries. And he was the last year's Startup Week organizer and one of this year's 3 lead organizers. Dan is an entrepreneur, software engineer, mentor, and investor from Buffalo, New York. He has been heavily involved in the Western New York tech community and has been an organizer and co-founder of organizations like Co-work Buffalo and Buffalo Startup Weekend. He is recipient of the Buffalo Business First 40 Under 40. He was previously the managing director of Z80 Labs, a startup incubator, and a $5 million seed fund in Buffalo. And he is one of the board members of UVANY, Upstate Venture Association of New York. In 2015, Dan co-founded ACV Auctions, a dealer-to-dealer marketplace for used vehicles, and is currently the CTO. In 2015, ACV Auctions won the $1 million grand prize from 43 North business competition. In total, they raised a combined $350 million in venture capital from large capital firms such as Bessemer Venture Partners, Bain Capital Partners, Tribeca Venture Partners, SoftBank Capital, Armory Square Ventures, among many others. In March 2021, ACV Auctions went public on the NASDAQ and has a current market cap of about $3 billion. ACV Auctions, which started in Buffalo, is now in markets across the entire U.S. and is expanding rapidly. ACV Auctions currently employs over 1,500 people across the country and is always dedicated to the local community. ACV Auctions was named UBC's Corporate Partner of the Year in 2019. Thank you guys for joining and enjoy the talk.
Cool, thanks.
That was you should be a host. That's like probably another career for you. Thanks for the introduction, Brennan. Thanks guys for being here. Super pumped to have you on, Dan, and last minute guest Mike as well. So I am here. I traveled to Sri Lanka, and there's power outages here all the time. So Mike's jumping on to support this session here. So let's kick it off, Dan. So the first question we have for you is a little bit about your story. So you were one of the original startup community organizers here in Buffalo, and in a lot of ways, you planted many of the seeds that have grown to trees that are around now. Where did you start, and how did you get to where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of a quick background. Yeah. Originally from Buffalo. Went to Sweet Home High School and University of Buffalo to study computer science after that. I actually met Mike at UB. We were both studying computer science. So yeah, I've been involved, since my days at UB, doing different tech startup or tech meetups and things like that. While I was at UB going to school, I was working at M&T Bank doing really working in the area doing network monitoring software and monitoring servers and traffic across the networks and making sure ATMs and other things weren't going down. So worked on that software system kind of through college and a couple years after. From there, I jumped over to Synacor. That was, a local startup. At that time this was around 2007. They were around 100 people and were really growing pretty quickly. So it was interesting to be there doing, kind of seeing their growth kind of at the 100-person mark. And, I think by the time I left, it was about 350 to 400 people. So I got to learn, a good amount around some pitfalls, things to do and things not to do as you're scaling, at least at that, somewhat later stage. So I did that. I was, system admin and then software engineer there for a while. And, at one point it was, Mike and I had always, while we were in college, always went through trying to come up with different like startup ideas and, what we're all, we'd be on in Bell Hall on a blackboard because they didn't have whiteboards back then in colleges. So not that it was that long ago, but, going through different startup ideas and things. We were reading like Paul Graham's essays and all this kind of stuff. So still early days, but knew I wanted to start my own company and get involved in startups, and got involved. Left Synacor, started a startup here with Steve Poland, who's a local guy, and worked on that for about 6 months or so. Things kind of fizzled out. So from there, I jumped into more freelancing, really around product and then actually doing some of the coding and development for, people kind of out of the West Coast and in New York that had really good ideas, that had some money. But, it's always tough if you haven't built software products before in terms of, what should you be building out of the gate? What does that MVP look like? And then being able to build it. So I was kind of wearing both of those hats during that time. So I worked with a couple startups. After that, kind of took a career shift a little bit and, went into running Z80 Labs. So, this was, around 2012. And, there was a kind of a young but kind of growing grassroots effort around startups and different tech meetups and startup meetups, and working with people who had the same interests across Rochester, Syracuse, Ithaca, like kind of all over upstate. We started trying to connect all those different cities as well and try not to be so siloed, whether it was different venture events or startup events, things like that. So I was kind of doing some of that on the side, and it was a good opportunity when Ron Schreiber, Jordy Levy were going to start up Z80 Labs. It was something that I thought Buffalo really needed. We didn't have an incubator. We didn't have a fund. I had tried raising some funds previously and kind of saw there wasn't a ton of activity, and there wasn't really a home base for people who wanted to do high growth tech startups here in Buffalo. So that was really the mandate. We were given $5 million that came through some of the stimulus dollars from like '08 or something like that. But the goal was invest this in early stage high growth companies. So did that for about almost 3 years, doing, like I said, a lot of mentoring, a lot of investing, and just trying to either bring people back to Buffalo or help keep people who wanted to do startups here in Buffalo. So did that, kind of got a little bored in terms of the investing and mentoring, wanted to get back to, getting my hands dirty and building product and building companies. And that's when I met Joe Neiman, who actually applied to the incubator. And, my father has kind of as a hobby, a used car dealership. So I kind of grew up understanding used cars, understanding the auction space. And it was just perfect timing as I was kind of looking for the next thing. So, fall of 2014, we kind of started talking to enough people, enough customers, and nights and weekends worked on this. And, at the end of the day, it seemed like there was some good traction. So, we had Jack Greco had joined as well. So the three of us kind of decided this is what we were going to go all in on. And 2015 in January, we were ready to go and full time on it. Had no income, we hadn't raised funds yet. So we were in the process of building a product, selling a product that didn't exist, and trying to fundraise all at the same time. So did that, and kind of as you mentioned with ACV, we over the time we were able to raise a bunch of venture capital, grow the business, and all that good stuff. So, and then I'm here, and I should note too, yeah, in September I did officially transition from CTO to an advisory role at ACV. So doing that in addition to going back to school a little bit to study machine learning and all that fun stuff. So, and now I'm here.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
that's awesome, Dan.
That's everything.
Yeah, there's so many things I would love to unpack from everything you just said. But one question I had for you from that was, you mentioned that you were kind of like a technical co-founder for hire for a period of time. And I think there's a lot of technical talent in Buffalo that spends a little bit of their time in that space. What really made you make that decision to be that technical co-founder for hire? And then how did you kind of navigate that into turning that into an opportunity for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, for me, it was fun. And, I wasn't going to go back to kind of a normal job. You get a bit of the taste of startup life and some of the free. I mean, it's not necessarily less work by any stretch of the imagination. The pay is a lot worse, at least initially. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to enjoy it. Seeing new interesting companies, new interesting ideas, and then being able to kind of solve those problems. For me, I love, I especially love unsexy industries and areas that, the traditional Silicon Valley would just kind of overlook. And how can you apply technology to totally, transform that industry or totally change the way that massive industries do things, right? So for me, that's super interesting. And it's just cool kind of learning about all different industries, different problems that exist. It's usually pretty surprising the way industries and companies do business every day. So yeah, for me, it was kind of an interesting thing. And, a lot of people who are software engineers like to make a lot of money and work at other companies. So they just go do that boring stuff instead. I guess I don't like money, so yeah.
That's clearly how you ended up where you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you meet just the people you meet, the way you have to kind of be able to evaluate problems, and and you have to do it at a very condensed time period, right? So everything is urgent, everything is fast. There's not a lot of money to do it. You really got to figure out ways to get things done, and how do you get that MVP out and not try to build everything in day one?
Yeah, I know. In that early stages of being in front of a whiteboard with a bunch of your friends trying to figure out what to do, it is that's kind of the chaotic time, I guess. But then it's as soon as you start getting into it and the problems start becoming fun and they actually become solvable, and you set yourself a pace, and then it just starts rolling from there, right?
I would say the early stage is the fun and easy part. The whiteboarding's fun. Talking about ideas, talking is really fun and easy. It's when you actually have to do the work and it becomes work and it's not fun, and it's not glamorous.
Right.
And, you haven't slept and you've gained 25 pounds. Yet you still have to keep rocking. Like those are that's kind of the pit of despair, right? And it's, a lot of things may not be going well. You don't even know if this thing's going to work. And you're kind of killing yourself over it. So yeah, I mean, it's once it becomes, I almost want to say from the outside, it would seem like it gets easier. It actually gets harder
Right.
every step of the way.
And I know, you spend a lot of time on, some like development work, because I think at some point you have to just find that neutral space, right? Like between the high highs and the low lows.
Mhm.
What kind of advice do you have for some of these like early stage founders that are going through those high highs and low lows? Like, what did you do to manage that, and maybe what were some mistakes that you made that you might wish somebody you can help somebody else not make?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and there was, I think obviously like taking care of your health and your body and like trying to get sleep and eating well. And, I definitely gained, I think, 25 pounds or so as we were, building this out. And then, that kind of set you off on the wrong foot. And then I think it's just kind of like the mental, kind of getting like mentally being in it. And being able to like withstand the waves that hit. So, I had my panic attack and went to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack at 32 or whatever, however old I was. And it was really just kind of not being able to have a release and like a right mental framework to work off it. So I really actually got into stoicism a good amount, and really the core of that is just how can you can't, basically it's, you can't affect what happens to you, you can only affect how you respond to it. And in stoicism there's this thing called negative visualization, which I think is great, and it's to help kind of make sure the peaks and valleys aren't as extreme. So when things are well, you need to like understand one thing can happen tomorrow that could totally change that and make it worse. And when things are terrible and continue to be terrible, they could always be worse, and how do you kind of go through that and just kind of get that mindset? So it's almost like something good happens, you're like, okay, well, something now is going to neutralize that. Oh, here it is. Okay. And when you expect these unexpected things to happen, you can handle it a lot better, and you're less emotional about it. You can think clearly, and you can be the calm person kind of in that as you go through that period. So, like I said, regardless of the stage, you're always going to have that. But it's just all about how you deal with it.
That anxiety is so real, right? Over time, as your company gets bigger and you have to manage it. Man, that's
Right.
tough.
Well, yeah.
Tough.
Once it becomes real, then that's the thing. It's like, okay, it's not just the three of us anymore. And then, yeah, there's just new layers and layers, whether it's new funding, new investors, new, competition rolling. Like there's all these different levels, and the attack vectors of anxiety just get bigger and bigger. So,
and you have to be the leader. You have to be the leader the whole time. There's
right.
no break. There's no break from being the lead, right? It's a lot.
You got to smile and put on a happy face. So
that's right. So, hey, I want to throw one of the questions out here that we have is, it's really rare for a first time founding CTO to lead a journey from zero to unicorn and then IPO, right? All the way to 1,500 people. So what are the ways that you had to grow as a leader? I mean, those are very different stages of a company. The strategies for management and leadership change through all those stages significantly.
Yeah.
And so, books, mentors, other resources. Tell me about that journey a little bit.
Yeah, it's and I've talked to a bunch of other CTOs that are kind of going through this, but yeah, there's definitely this transition of, where initially, I was out doing pitches, we were talking to customers, and then at some point I'd get home and start coding from, after dinner until basically my brain shut down, which could be 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And, so that's kind of the early stage CTO. You're responsible, in many ways for just building the product and getting it out as fast as possible and making sure it's the right product and all that good stuff. So it's very much, a lot of, a lot is on you to go and do, and you don't have a lot of other people or anybody to, take some of that load. So yeah, it's very much like heads down, get this done, let's get it out, let's get going. But it's interesting too, because on the software side, it's you're building the product, and when the product's done, and you're going to launch, the product's not done. So it's like you have to run a marathon to go run a marathon, because now you have users, and everything you thought, all your gut assumptions on what this thing needed to be, you're just going to get kicked in the face, and you're going to have to redo stuff. Things are going to be completely wrong. And if you got a ton of users, you start getting all that feedback. And it's kind of around that time you got to figure out, how much can you scale yourself. Generally, if business is going, you're also getting a little more involved in the business. And, so you start getting to a point where you're doing too much business stuff and not getting to, the product development stuff. So, then you got to start, bringing on people, sometimes it's contractors to kind of flex some capacity. Sometimes you have to start hiring people. And then, so yeah, that transition then goes to you're hiring people, you're bringing on people, and you have a team that's building it, and you're in charge of managing that team and making sure they are delivering, and keeping in touch with the needs of the business, and making sure that trickles into what's being done, prioritizing and making kind of tough decisions on, hey, here's some technical debt we have to clean up, and we're not going to be able to do this feature for 3 weeks, right? And having that conversation with the business. So it's a lot of that, but you start feeling guilty because you went through these early stages where everything was on you. You had to be the one coding. That was your job. That was your responsibility. And then you go to like not doing that, or doing that much less. And there's like this CTO founder's guilt of, I'm not really doing work. I'm not doing my job. And there's always way too many things to do anyway. So this is kind of a weird transition where it's kind of like the end of Good Will Hunting. Like, it's not your fault, like you got to kind of have that scene where, it's not your job to write all the code anymore. It's your job to build a team that can develop products and features, do it reliably, like good quality, all that great stuff. And really at the end of the day, deliver, value to the customers. So you do that, and then you start, as you transition on, now you're not managing, a tight group of developers. Now you may have multiple teams. You'll have different disciplines, and these are, a data science and machine learning team. You have infrastructure teams, QA teams, internal, technical operations, backend. So all of the things, and you have to start understanding how to build it out. So your job, really then goes to becoming a recruiter, right? So, you have to help attract the best talent and bring that talent in, and build an environment that wants, that makes the people you're bringing on want to stay. So it's a huge transition. Obviously, by the time you get big enough, there's, you're managing the people who are managing the people who are managing the people, and it becomes a lot around org structure and in things like that, and how do you have communication throughout the organization. There's a lot of like really good books on it, but I kind of had to go through that. Bessemer, which is one of our investors, has like a CTO group, which I participated in a little bit. I probably should have participated more, but I didn't necessarily have a mentor from kind of the CTO standpoint. I mean, we definitely had mentors from just kind of business and strategy and things like that. But I think it's also to be said too, as you grow that org out, a lot of times you think, okay, this person's a great developer, like we should make them manager because they're the best developer. And generally that's the wrong answer. So for me, I think what's really important, we don't train, no one's born a manager, and a lot of times companies don't train people on the job of manager, because becoming a manager is such different than an individual contributor role. And a lot of times we just kind of like, here's this totally new job and go at it and you should be fine because you're good at coding. So it's usually, it fails pretty bad. So for me, I mean, I love Audible. So, I mean, I listen to as many books as I can get. And there was a lot of really good ones kind of at that time that were coming out. The Manager's Path. And there's another one that's like, sounds very similar, but they were all like around, I got it here somewhere. I just looked them up because I forgot the name of them. Making of a Manager and The Manager's Path. So those were like two that came out, and it was really around how do you go from engineer to manager, and how do you help put those systems in place. So for me, it was, how can I consume as much info on, making that transition? Because myself, I was going through that, but then also how do you help, others in your org as you're building it out, have that training, have that feedback, and, also just giving them the books as well to go read and figure out, and explaining to people how they're, as the org grows, and especially as fast as we were growing, you go through a lot of growing pains, and you gotta evolve pretty quickly. So the time frames that you may have in other companies, we didn't really have that.
And your trajectory on that path was super fast. I mean, that 5-year time frame from founding, not that you went into it with no experience or anything like that, but still super fast, velocity on that, which is awesome. So now, having been through it, having read a bunch of books and things like that, if you could go back and give yourself advice, and I could probably pull a couple of these things out of what you just said, but if you go back and say, hey, the beginning of ACV 5, 8, 10 years ago, as in those stages, what would you say to yourself? You're like, hey, this is what you needed to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like I said, I think the training piece is huge. And I think that's something we learned. I think you assume, because you're hiring someone that seems great, that they're going to hit the ground running. And the reality is, like, training is your biggest thing. And you need to do way more of it than you ever thought. And, a lot of times you can lose really great people because, they weren't brought into a good situation, or they weren't properly trained up. And so they kind of default to their own ways. So, I think training's huge. I think there was a lot of things around, how do you, if you have all these opportunities to do all these different things, you have limited resources and budget. You can't do everything. So how do you know what to say yes to, and more importantly, what to say no to? A lot of companies will see, you'll get opportunities, once you start rolling, you'll have more and more people reaching out. You're not reaching out anymore, they're coming to you. So you always feel a little flattered, and, oh my God, I'm beautiful, it's great, everyone wants, but the reality is, you can't say yes to everything, and you really need to be strategic and diligent on the things you say yes to, because you do have a finite amount of resources. And if you don't want to get distracted and pulled all over, and now you're not working on the core of what you're set out to do. So I think that's important. Maybe similarly, it's, there's always going to be a ton of fires that are burning, and you can't put them all out, right? So it's figuring out which fires to go put out and which ones to let burn and smolder, right? And I think that's kind of it's a tough thing to do, but I think, it's one of those things that, you try to solve everything, or you get frustrated because you're not solving all of these other things, when at the end of the day, those can be pretty minor. And, going after, fixing one or two major issues can be a game changer. But, if you get distracted by the little ones, you can run into trouble. So, I think that's a lot of them. I think the other piece too that we've learned is just around, like, building a moat for your business. For us, we had built an auction, marketplace, and, that was all well and good, but, at the end of the day, anyone could build a marketplace and throw it up online and throw some used cars up. So, once we had hit that point where we had that and we had good traction, it's kind of taking a look at the business and saying, what are the things we should be doing? What's our unique advantage that nobody else has that we need to double down on? So it's not trivial for them to just copy paste. We had we had competitors that were like copying the background image from our website and the sound from our app, like crazy stuff like that. And so they can copy features, but what are those big things? And, for us, we realized we had this inspection, this fleet of inspectors across the country. And, we had them and others did not, right? So we had trained employees that worked for us that were using our software, inspecting tens of thousands of vehicles a month. What could we do with that, right? And that's where we spun up an R&D team, and with the goal that, how can we have unique imaging? How can we collect data that nobody's getting on these used cars? What hardware and software can we build that's patentable, that's, unique, building hardware and connecting, like that's non-trivial for, not even traditionally tech companies that we were kind of going against, but, for even as a software company, building hardware is not an easy transition to make. So, we started doing a bunch of that and really started changing the industry on where some people may say, why do you have all these people? Isn't this a tech company? And the reality is like, yes, we are. And because we have these employees, here's all the great stuff that we can do now. And trying to copy that is so hard. So that's the other piece that's always, how do you keep thinking and trying to like look around the corner in terms of what your business is, and not just what it is today, but how is it going to evolve? Because a lot of times you got to start yesterday putting those changes in place. So it's not not the easiest thing to do. Once again, as you're low on resources and things like that, but making the effort to try to not just continue incrementally growing, but what are the things you can also do that's going to help you leapfrog the competition, or really put you that much further ahead. So I think that all that stuff's important. There's probably others, but I forget.
In the 30 minutes that we've been talking, Dan, you've talked about so many disciplines and learning so many different things, from tech to management to hardware to so many different areas. And I think part of that high growth environment that you were in is that you kept having to transition from not like you just always had something you didn't know and you had to learn it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the nature of business for a lot of people. What are maybe some tools and tactics, or maybe self-discipline tricks that you had to balance between managing what you have today versus planning for what you maybe know is going to come in the future?
Yeah, I think part of it is having a good vision on where you do want to be in 3 years or so. From a business, from a market standpoint. For us, as I was kind of talking about spinning up that R&D group, it was around that time where internally I was championing it, and I don't think this really took off. But it's really like we were really an inspection company, right? We did these inspections, we had all this. That's where all the unique data was coming from. And oh, by the way, we can sell the car too. And as time went on, we acquired a company that does off lease. So anytime you're trading in your Honda, like they come out and inspect it. So then we started looking at the data that we can get from these vehicles, right? And that in and of itself, like I was saying, was a huge moat. But you got to kind of look forward and say, okay, what could we do here, and not just be focused on, oh, we got to get this marketplace feature out. We're an auction company, blah blah blah. It's kind of looking to the left and the right a little bit, and seeing how what you're doing with one piece could actually be just as big of a market, or maybe bigger of a market if you do that. And oh, by the way, it's also going to help this. So it's, in a way, I never want to be like a one-trick pony where we're a marketplace and that's it. And then all of a sudden, somebody else comes out with, whatever we have plus one, and now we're the ones that are behind. So for me, I just always try to figure out what could we be doing and building that the other people aren't even thinking about yet. What are those things that they're going to have to have an executive meeting, they're going to have to reorg, they're going to have to move budgets around to go copy exactly what you just did. And that's basically what happened, which is great. So I think it's that stuff, that it's that kind of thing, just never really being content with where you're at. Even if you are having success, there's people that are going to copy what you're doing and try to come after you, and there's kind of the incumbents that are there and they're going to try to copy and come after you. So I think it's just always, it's a good amount of paranoia, and then just understanding that vision and being flexible with where you can go with that. And then at the end of the day, you just have to execute in terms of, once again, you can't do all of the things, right? So what are the things that make sense as you go along? And, so for us, we have a transportation company and a financing company, an inspection company. We're also an right? So we have all these things that we've built up over time, but we didn't do it all at once. But we kind of had to look at the market and say, what other things can we do, and what opportunities are there that nobody else is doing that we can do? And when you marry it up, as part of the platform, that's what you get. So it's not just a product, but a suite of products.
Right. And I know, you're talking about, figuring this vision out and keeping it in front of you. But you're also talking about training and hiring and scaling your organization and people very quickly. So what were maybe some of the challenges you faced in maybe leadership, as you had to take this vision that you and maybe your core leadership team had clearly in front of you, but you were also hiring really quickly and new people were joining your team, and you had to make sure they were also, behind you on that vision that probably was iterating very quickly?
Yeah. I mean, I think, from a technical standpoint, there's a lot, right? So you can have a team of engineers, and there's certain points where, the way the code, is originally written, or the way it's structured or architected, as you add more and more people, you can actually start slowing down, right? You have more people in the code, in the same parts of the code, changing, like, you can start running into issues and where you may need to, in addition to scaling your organization, you got to totally scale and maybe redo, your software platform, right? And your architecture, so that, you can have more teams, they can become autonomous, in terms of being able to release features and products. So we implemented domain-driven design, which is a great way to have your technology org mimic your business and your different business units, so that you can deliver value to these business units, and not be encumbered with all of maybe there's delays in other areas of the on other teams that are slowing you down. You never want to be in that situation, but there's kind of the infrastructure and the software architecture that you need to have in place in order to do that, right? And then as you're doing, you're looking to hire and add more people. Your hiring process is a huge thing. How are you interviewing? So the 1 year we went from 39 people to like 120 people, and how do you in 1 year? So how do you do that, right? So you need to mature the org structure, but then you also have to hire people in. Oh, and you have to make sure you're still building product and delivering. So we definitely went through a phase where, bringing on recruiters, understanding our interview process, what are technical interviews like, the manager interviews, started adding different layers of management, to try to help. I always like to keep stuff as flat as possible, but, as you grow, you need these different layers in, and, but yeah, the whole onboarding, if you're hiring about 100 people in a year, you need to look at a lot of resumes. You need to do a lot of interviews, and you don't want to waste your team's time, either with bad people or, you have 5 engineers sitting interviewing someone, that they shouldn't be talking to, or is a waste of time. So you got to balance that out, but you still have to mature it very quickly. And it's definitely a trick. There's definitely growing pains, getting all the tooling in place, and what your process is as you're growing and changing all the time is, it's not static. It's not a static environment. So you just need to be kind of flexible enough and able to move fast. But yeah, it's not easy at all. And, there's a lot on just kind of organizational architecture and, the flow of communication as you grow and all that stuff. So, and it's very easy when you're trying to hire quickly to just hire anyone and not hire the right people. So, yeah, these are all kind of pitfalls and not easy to solve.
So for yourself as a leader, you come from a really strong technical background. I happen to know. And so, with that strong technical background, how did you manage and how do you continue to manage? Because this never stops, the ongoing technical growth alongside the business and management growth needed to succeed at this level, right? And over time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, in a way, kind of back to the vision on where you want to get to. You need to kind of work backwards a little bit and understand, there's immediate things you can do to help the business. But then there's also needs to be longer term bets, that you need to, big changes, that may take 8 to 12 months to implement, right? And it could be something that, is your underlying infrastructure that you need to completely rebuild, and it'll put you on a path where you're good kind of for the next, 5 years or so. But in reality, if you're successful, no customer will ever know, and nobody internally will know that you did any of that stuff. So how do you sell that in terms of here's the stability, the flexibility, that comes with doing some of these things that no one will ever see unless you don't do them, and then they'll see when you have performance issues or things go down or break. So, I think that's always the trick on how do you balance. We really try, and even on the different teams, it's as you're working on, you're going through a sprint, it could be, here's how much new work, new product development we're doing, here's how much bug fix we're doing, and here's how much tech debt we're cleaning up, right? And try to have that blend to be able to make sure that you're always working on all three of those and not solely on just one, right? And then you may need to, have certain initiatives where it's like, hey, we're breaking off this team or we're setting up this team whose sole focus is this 8 to 12 month initiative. And they're going to go away and they don't exist in terms of, I want a new feature or this or that. And you just have to have the discipline to, know that this needs to get done and be able to sell it to the business that this, like, we have to do this. You don't like it, but you have to do it because you're really not going to like it if we don't do it. So, yeah. You're muted.
There it is. Let me shift gears for a minute. So, back, I don't remember if it was 2009 or 2010, you and I went to Startup Week Boulder. It was the first one that they had ever done. And we got to see what a functioning community looked like, a functioning tech community with all of its pieces, legal, HR, business, marketing, the whole, not just the tech, right? Not just the user groups. And they were about 10 years in. And so now we've come back. We came back from that. It's been 10-ish years, and we have made quite a bit of progress, right? In the last 10 years, a number of us had to start companies in our 20s to try and build something or move away. And a lot of us chose build something. And so now from here, what do you feel like we need for the next 10 years to go as well as the last 10 years have?
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way. Yeah, so 2010, we came back and started. Open Coffee Club started. Right after that, which was great, and that was kind of a good catch-all and understand who's even in the community, right? I mean, I think we had that issue prior. There was no co-working space, there was no incubator, there was no, it wasn't a ton of cash for early stage tech companies. So yeah, it was a pretty blank canvas, right? And I think just with Z80 Labs coming in, like 2012, we had a co-working space, we had a bunch of startup weekends and things like that, which I think are great. And then 43 North and other programs, and now there's so many programs, there's so many investment dollars, that can go into everything from entrepreneurship programs at UB, all the way through to just kind of general public stuff. So, it's definitely night and day. I mean, I think what we need to do is really just more double down on the amount of companies that are coming out. And obviously, I think we're beyond raising venture capital as a metric for success. I think it's really we need to get more successful companies, and I think that's really the next stage. If we could have $1 billion in venture capital deployed, but if no successful companies are coming out of it, then it doesn't really do much good. So, I think what we need is really just around more companies, more shots on net, but more success. We need to see more exits. We need to see more businesses kind of grow and develop and create new jobs. I mean, I think a big gap that we have, here locally is that as you start scaling and you get beyond kind of the startup stage and you're not like a big corporation, there's that middle tier of management that I don't really think we have a lot of here. And I think that's the big trick. Who's gone through, and that's what I love with ACV. We've essentially trained, and a lot of these people have come through growing 300-400% year over year, what that looks like, what you have to do, the pitfalls, you have to kind of get bloody a little bit before you can, be able to jump in. And I think having more companies be successful and kind of go through these different phases is going to, produce a lot more talent around, kind of those scaling stage companies. I think it's great. We've been able to bring in people from, Silicon Valley and other places across the US that have done it, which is great. And it's always good injecting, Western New York with people who have been there, done that. But I think getting more and more people through that process is going to, be a game changer. And I think it's going to help the quality of the companies, their ability to scale, their chances for success are going to go up greatly as we have more and more people like that.
So we're coming out to the last 10 minutes of this session, and I'm sure we can sit here for a bunch of more hours and dive into it. So thanks, Dan, for all the value that you've provided so far. Let's answer some of the one of these questions that we have from in the QA section. We have one from sorry if I butcher this name, Slawek Potaz. The question is, hi Dan, what would be your advice as a super experienced CTO to doing technical specification for a product that will reflect user needs, surveys, your own feelings of the problem? For example, ACV Auctions nailed this undercarriage smartphone inspection tool. How did you go from concept to final product, multiple iterations, or crystal clear specification, and just 1 to 2 generations of prototypes? That is a really specific question.
Yeah,
going way over my head, but
it's okay. I can answer it. I'm familiar with that, fortunately.
Sweet.
No, I mean, I think anytime, if you're looking at product development, in startup phase, it's very fluid, but at the end of the day, you need to talk to your customers, people who you think are the customers. A big trick when you're doing that isn't, listening to them tell you what they think they need or like the solution. It's really, how do you kind of go to that next level and understand what their problem is, right? And how to solve it, right? They may say, I want a button that I can click that does this thing, but you need to be able, the really great product people are able to like ask, why do they need that? Why do they need to do that thing? What is that doing? What does that enable, right? And asking kind of those deeper questions, because then you could find out like, oh, we just need to automate an email that gets sent out to accounting or something like that, right? But they just know what they know in their workflow, and they're just trying to impose that on what you've built. Really understanding the problems of people. So, I think from, kind of the virtual lift thing, I mean, that was something where my dad was buying cars on our platform, and he would buy cheaper cars, and he would get them, and he would always call me, I just bought this Subaru. I put it up on a lift and it's got an oil leak or it's got a blown head gasket. And he would just call me like every week. I'm like, well, stop buying Subarus that are from 2004 to 2008. But at the same time, it was one of those like, how can we put something on a lift? And we can't because there's, you know, it's too expensive. It's not rational to be able to like put all the cars up on a lift. The dealerships won't let you do it. So how could you simulate that, right? And that's where we kind of got thinking, you know, the problem is there's a third of the vehicle that you can't see. How can we show people that, right? And, you know, so that's kind of where we started thinking. I'm like, well, how do we Xerox the bottom of it, right? And so does the thing move? Well, that's pain because we're on gravel and all these other things. Well, like a speed bump, you just drive over it. Okay, well, let's go from there. And that kind of got it in process. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, you got to start with the problem you're trying to solve. You know, in what ways can you solve it? And there's maybe different ways. And once you have that, then you can start, you know, from your, you know, your specs and stuff. I mean, it's really just laying it out, what you're looking to do and break it into small enough parts that you can kind of attack it and go develop it. You know, there's no like one way. But you know, it's just really understanding your customer and really what they're trying to do and not what they're just saying or complaining about. You know, that can help you really nail the specifications and stuff.
Sweet. And for our last question, Dan, what is something that you're passionate about that you don't get to talk about very often?
Yeah, I mean, so kind of somewhat recently, you know, I've really gotten interested in kind of genetics, genomics, but really from the standpoint of, you know, I guess as a partial hypochondriac / engineer, you know, how I kind of look at the healthcare system and how we look at health and monitoring our bodies. So I kind of mentioned early on, you know, I built these software systems to monitor, you know, computer networks and servers and applications that were running, knowing, you know, were they acting weird, you know, were they down, were, you know, so I look at how we handle, you know, kind of our most important asset, which is our body and our health. Like, how do we do that? Well, you wait till something hurts, you go to your doctor that doesn't know anything about you. They ask what hurts, and then they probably give you some pills and then say, let me know if you have any violent reactions to this. I hope you're okay. Come back when something else hurts, right? So for me, you know, looking at it from, you know, your body's hardware, your genetics, you know, kind of the software layers, the epigenetics, what's turning on the good and bad parts of your genes, you know, like, how do you look at the body as a very complex system and know which things, you know, what are you predisposed to with your genetics? What are things that, you know, you can do to know something's out of whack? And then, you know, like machine learning, you know, we've come a long way. I think we're still scratching the surface of ML. But I think the compute power and different techniques have come along that we can start leveraging ML to be better than any doctor that's out there. And why rely on one doctor who may have this idea of what the problem is because they saw it 15 years ago, and then somebody else goes to another doctor that hasn't seen it, and there you go, like, you're dead, right? Or whatever. So for me, it's why aren't we doing that? We have wearables now, you know, and I think just kind of understanding people's genetics. We're all running on different hardware, running on different software on top of it, but expecting to all be treated and, you know, issues are the same, right? So for me, that's super interesting, and just kind of leveraging ML, leveraging, you know, leveraging genetics, genomics is a huge potential, especially as people are more aware of their health and things like that, kind of with COVID and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think that's kind of, yeah, that's something I get pretty deep into, and you know, so that's a fun thing.
Awesome. All right, so we only got a couple minutes left, so I'm going to throw one at you that I've been thinking about for a while. With the pandemic having had the effect that it's had on remote working, and companies branching out to hire from all over the country and all over the world in a way that they haven't before. And Torch, where I am now, right, is no exception. Right, hiring people from all over the place. And so, what does it mean as we're moving forward? And I don't know if there's an answer to this question yet, but like, what does it mean for a tech company to be a Buffalo tech company? What does it mean for a New York or a San Francisco company to be a San Francisco or a New York tech company when maybe the founders reside in a specific city, but the future starting today, if we were to start a company today, we would end up hiring people automatically by default,
right?
All across the domestic US and the world.
Yeah.
So what impact do you think that's going to have, given that this is a community oriented, conversation and week event that we're talking about here?
Yeah.
What sort of impact do you think that'll have?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I guess I don't, well, obviously I don't know. But, my thought is that, as we're, what does it mean to be a Buffalo based company? I think companies are going to have pockets of people across different geographies. And, so, could be a Buffalo company and there's an engineering team, that's in Toronto and, down in Texas and wherever. Right. And I think that's fine. I think from a community standpoint, I think people are still social beings. I think we'd rather, at least I would rather be doing this in person, with real people instead of staring at another Zoom.
Agreed.
So, I think there'll be a shift to where it's more, it's people who want to be in a certain area and with a group of people. I think there are some efficiencies, especially early on, as you're all sitting in a room. I think Zoom and other things are very transactional. And I think there is benefits to being in person. So, I think it'll kind of vary, but in terms of what becomes a Buffalo company, like, I think that'll be tough to tell. And maybe it is just, hey, there's, 5-10 people that are with this company, and I guess that qualifies now, right? I mean, that's definitely possible. And I think while it could change the dynamic, it also allows people who we've historically lost that have moved to other cities and stuff for opportunities can now come here and high quality of life, ability to buy a house and all that good stuff. So I think that's kind of how I see it changing. I still think there'll be people in real life sitting at coffee shops talking and enjoying that experience, and other people may just want to never see a person again in their life except over a computer, and Godspeed. But I think the majority of people are still gonna look to be able to meet or easily travel and meet with others that they work with.
I would really like to thank you guys for this talk. Super educational. I know I got a couple books that I'm gonna, look at. And again, thank you guys so much. Shout out to Dan, Mike, and Kanishka for hosting this, and shout out to Buffalo Startup Week for, really doing this for the community. Thank you again, guys, and we'll be ending the chat now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Later.